Hi there, and welcome to another episode of 411 Pop Culture, where real people talk about really everything. I'm your host, Justin Steele. With me tonight is Danielle Almendra. How you doing tonight, Danielle?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good. Well, we are about to review Lifetime's adaptation of My Sweet Audrina. Long overdue. I just want to say thank you. We've had so many good responses to our VC Andrews episodes, and so we've had a few requests to do My Sweet Audrina, and we've been wanting to do it for a while. So Danielle just finally reread the book. I mean, I've read it probably about 8 or 9 times. She reread it. We rewatched the movie a couple times. Now I'll say the very first time I watched the movie, I had watched it with commercials and it was on TV, and I'm not gonna lie, I hated it. I thought it was a terrible adaptation. I thought there was so much that they did wrong with it. But the next couple times, like, I went through and I showed you the movie finally because I bought a DVD of it. I rewatched it and I'm like, you know what? It wasn't that bad. And then we watched it with our friend Gina, and she was like, you both had a good reaction to it. So the more now that I've watched it, it's really started to grow on me. And it's not only grown on me, I'm actually thinking it might be one of the better adaptations. It still has a lot of problems. Yeah. We're missing characters. Again, we talk all the time. I don't think in the novel, she's described as having chameleon hair that's constantly changing colors, and I think we all kind of have our preconceived notions with the book covers, the step backs, the reddish. She has reddish hair. Vera has pure red hair. Audrina, it was supposed to be this sort of mix and all that. But obviously in this adaptation, the hair color's wrong, but it's not as big of a deal to me that it was like with Heaven, or if they had made, the Dollinger kids brunettes, etc. But overall, I thought the cast did really great. I thought Arden was really good. Again, problems, and we'll get into it all, but a lot of problems with missing characters, changing characters' motivations, who they are, trying to make Arden a white knight hero, etc. Right. But again, just the first time I watched it, and I can understand if people are like, what are you talking about? What do you think it's good now? I get it, because I hated it at first, but I actually am really starting to like it. So what did you think of the movie when you first watched it and watching it again tonight?
I loved it. So let's be honest here. I haven't read My Sweet Audrina in probably 25 years, maybe. Right. It's been a really long time. It's always been one of his favorites.
Yeah.
I read it. I liked it. That was it. So when I watched the movie, I hadn't remembered like almost anything from the novel except probably the big reveal. Obviously that.
And spoilers. It's happening.
So when I watched the movie, I really enjoyed it. Because I didn't remember anything about it, and I had all these weird feelings about the characters. I liked them, but I'm like something just felt off. And then when I went back and I read the book, and then I went and watched the movie again, I had like a different kind of feeling. It was just awesome. So if you haven't read the books in a while, or the book, sorry, I would suggest going back and reading it and also watching, just to see like the difference that you'll feel when you read it.
I think what helped me a lot too was like getting to see it cinematically this time. We watched it on the bigger screen. It didn't have the commercials. Like when I first watched it, I think I watched it on my laptop on the Lifetime app, so you still have the commercials. Yeah. And it really I never connected. Mm-hmm. I was like, okay, I get what they're doing here. Arden, they're trying to make him a better guy. I still liked Vera. I'm like, they all got the roles they were playing. But when you're watching it with like all these breaks, it's really frustrating. However, I did get a copy. I don't think they really ever released it in the U.S. on DVD. I had to buy a copy that came from Canada, and it was not even really like a real DVD. It was like a DVD-R or whatever, DVR. It still plays and it looks great, but I'm telling you, like, it was a much, much better experience. So first, right off the bat, the thing is, I think this, of all the books in V.C. Andrews' sort of catalog, I think My Sweet Audrina would be one of the most difficult to try and adapt. It's a story about a mystery that's going the whole time through, and I think that in the book, it's easy to cloak the idea or the identity of the older sister because you're all from Audrina's point of view, and she's already an unreliable narrator, whereas in a film adaptation, you have to be kind of clever to sort of keep the mystery going. I think watching this one, people are gonna, even if they had read the novels, might still be able to guess right off the bat, like, what's going on. But still, I think it works. It's even if you kind of figure it out, it's still an interesting story. And I think that that's one of the things this movie did really well. I also think, like, I usually have issues with like the narration, whether there's a voiceover or not. I feel like in this case, it was okay without it. Personally, still in most V.C. Andrews adaptations, I would like a voiceover to kind of tell the story. I just think that's how we all did it. But so right off the bat, what did you think of like recently reading the novel and now as an adaptation? The casting, the setting, and the narration, all that.
So I think that a voiceover would have helped. I think because I recently just reread the book, her going from 7 to 9 to 11, I felt like you kind of felt the first time you watched it where she was like 12.
Right.
Like when we started watching it. So it really takes away a lot of that stuff from when she's younger and how she really didn't remember anything. Additionally, I love the casting. I think just after reading it, again, that they did a fantastic job with the casting. I mean, nailed it. Usually
I really
I'm
think
very
so,
picky about that.
In fact, Arden might be one of my favorite of the leads cast as a male sort of lead in all of these adaptations. I feel like he's the closest to, like how V.C. Andrews once said to Christy Swanson, "You're what I pictured as Kathy."
Yeah.
I feel like if V.C. Andrews had seen Arden in this, she would have been like, "You're what I thought of for Arden." Personally, that's just what I kind of got from that.
Yeah, I loved Audrina. I don't think she was exactly what I pictured in the book, but I liked her as an actress.
Correct, yeah,
I liked
she was really
she was
good,
great.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. The dad, I think, I hit the nail because, and I kind of had a little funny moment when I was like, "Oh, Arden, hi," and then I looked at the dad and I was like, "Oh, hi." I'm like, "Oh, I'm in that middle." That's when I started laughing because I'm like, Arden, young, dad, old. Hello. Anyway, cut this out, please. Anyway, so I thought the dad really nailed it. I think he was like,
really good.
He was handsome. He was,
he worked
charming.
well as when he was supposed to be charming, as well as when he was supposed to be disheveled.
Yep.
He always kind of
he was
walked that
firm,
line.
and he had that kind of scare tactic.
Yeah.
It's like, no, Audrina, and you're like, oh, dad said no. But then he could be really sweet too, and I really liked the actor that portrayed him for sure. Lastly, the comment to you. The house. So you and I always kind of have an issue. Well, I always have an issue with the house.
Well, I usually agree with you on the house. I think we talked about it before with the house this time. I feel like they did a really good job with the house. I feel like it looks how it's supposed to look in terms of it's on the edge of these woods. It has the cupola. It looks like the house. I also agree with Danielle that it should be more run down.
The house. I would say that I almost pictured it white because I think white fern.
Oh, sure.
So I picture it white. I picture it very run down, like needs a good paint job. The shrubbery's kind of overrun and stuff like that. Like, that's how I pictured it. I get the setting, the landscaping. I think, like, being on the woods, I think they did a really good job there. Mm-hmm. But the house, just from afar, just didn't quite look like I pictured it. But the inside did.
I will say, though, personally, I think it's the closest of all the houses so far, where we've talked about, like, Farthingale Manor, way too small. Even the Foxworth Hall was close but not right. I feel like this one was the closest to what a house should have looked like. I also want to speak about to casting Vera. I thought she did a really good job. I felt like, in the series, Heather Graham took the campy sort of approach to it. In the Castile series, it was Jason Priestley. Yeah. And I feel like in this adaptation, it was Vera, the actress who played Vera. Now, again, she didn't go as over the top as Heather Graham or Jason Priestley, but she got that Vera is supposed. She did well. I remember the first time I watched it, I didn't really think so. I thought the younger version of Vera was really a spot on, and I remember thinking like, oh, this girl's not right. But now that I've rewatched it a couple of times, I'm like, no, she got it. Yeah. She really got it. The sort of like flirting with Lamar, the got to be sweet now to Audrina to get back in, but then ultimately treacherous. Vera's a hard character.
Yeah, I mean, it was all there. Yeah. It just, maybe the timeline was a little off, but all the concepts were there, and I think she did a really great job. I'm glad you did bring up Lamar, because I did have a thought when we were rewatching this that he is not really what I would think. That casting to me was a little...
Oh, see, I thought it was pretty spot on. I thought it was spot on. In fact, probably of all the characters, I think maybe the weakest of the actors, but the closest to the look of what I thought Lamar was supposed to kind of look like. The dark hair, everything.
That was it.
That was it. Yeah, as well as the sort of pale guy from New York City, piano teacher. I don't know what else she wanted. Okay, but I do want to say in terms of the overall story and adaptation, some of the things that I missed, yes, I feel like we've been talking about this for a while now. I feel like they need to make these so that they're 2-hour movies or 2.5 hours with commercials, if you will. Just to fill it, smooth it out a little bit. Like, because these tend to feel so rushed. It's so like, bam, you're here, and now we're here. And especially in this story, I feel like that worked. Some of the rushing, because you're supposed to feel like that from Audrina's point of view, that all of a sudden, she's 9 years old, 12 years old, and they did do that, but this movie, the adaptation, definitely focused on the second half of the novel's events more, the adult part, which is, we were talking about it, and I was trying to rush Danielle through because I knew we were going to film this episode, and she's like, the second half's the more exciting part, though, and I'm like, you're right, it is, and that's kind of what they focused on, but I thought, like, it would have been a nicer setup just to have the childhood sort of memories, how she's walking around. Like, they sort of did that where she's walking through the room with the colors. And again, I also said to you beforehand, I feel like the music in this movie was fine, but I would have really loved to have heard a Christopher Young score. He's who did 1987's Flowers in the Attic. He's done a lot of stuff since then, but I feel like he's who should be doing the V.C. Andrews music. Not that there was anything wrong in this one about it, but I personally thought that it would... The music from Flowers in the Attic 1987 version was what I actually thought belonged to My Sweet Audrina. The sort of twinkling of the wind chimes that you hear in there and stuff, because the wind chimes and all that was a big deal. I will say, though, what we lost in the younger half of the story, and they did do a good job with, like, when they were at the beach and he puts the coat on her, Damien runs her back in. That's all stuff that happened when she was younger. So I'm glad they did retain a lot of stuff. Or, like, when he forces Vera to kind of eat the porn. Like, that's all great, and I'm glad they were able to work it even when they were a little bit older. But the stuff I really missed, and I know you didn't care from the novel, was like the Aunt Mercy Marie stuff where they're at the tea parties and stuff. I always thought that was a really quirky, kind of weird thing. But I also really loved the relationship between Lucky and Elspeth. And I missed that because it is such a nice sort of comparison to Vera and Audrina as sisters. And I would have liked to have seen that, because Lucky in this movie, she was kind of a little odd, like a little, like she's like in delusional land. Whereas I feel like Audrina's mother in the novel was kind of not wanting to go with this, but she did. And then she kind of like lived her life until she died. And so, I don't know. What did you think about, like, that? Like, did you miss any of that from this adaptation, or were you fine that they kind of just glossed right over it?
These two women are cooped up in this house, and obviously right now we're in the middle of a pandemic, so us two have been cooped up for a little while, and I could totally see us doing something like that.
Exactly,
but it's like,
exactly.
It is
wacky,
but like...
It's certainly kooky, yes.
But I'm like, if we, we're getting at each other's nerves, like, let's have tea. You're annoying.
Right? But it's a way to kind of, because it's a very passive-aggressive way. And that's what I liked when, like, even Audrina, it's sort of this idea of, like, yes, Audrina has her problems, but a lot of her mental problems comes from these external, all the family members and people in her life. She even starts to kind of do that to Sylvia when she's older, when they're older. She tries to kind of resuscitate these tea party things, and Sylvia's like, no, cuckoo. Like, I'm all messed up, but you're cuckoo. And that's, Sylvia missing from what did you think about, like having the character of Sylvia removed, I think changed a lot of stuff, because she's supposed to be, when you're reading the book, she's not evil, but you are supposed to, like, suspect her of a lot of stuff. And so she sort of becomes the hero in the end, but instead now we need to have a hero who is Arden, which changes Arden's whole thing. So first off, what do you think about, like, not having Sylvia in there?
I think for me it took away from kind of Audrina's pull to the house. I think she would have took off and left. And so in here, it doesn't make too much sense that she's staying in the movie. Because you're like, oh, just because of the architecture thing? Like,
okay. I thought you meant at the end staying. But yes, staying in the house.
Sorry, just staying in the house in general. Like, obviously she's going to stay there to help take care of Sylvia. And so that didn't really make too much sense to me. To remove her from that, because then you're like, girl, just leave that wackadoo house.
Well, and Billy, too, though, was another reason to kind of get Arden to want to stay. And see, and that's the thing, removing Billy, because Arden changes. In the book, he's kind of a douche in the end. And it's hard for us. I think we read these books when we're like 13, 14 for like the romance. It's like the one book somehow our parents all let us read, even though it's probably the one books they shouldn't. But like we're reading them. So it is hard. Like you don't want Audrina to leave Arden. But when you read it and you're older, you're like, leave him. What a jerk. And so you're like, why are you going back in there? And that's part of the tragedy of the story.
That is so true.
But so to have Arden be like, now he's like the white knight in this story, which is what, like, well, why would Audrina leave him?
Right.
You know, and because it's supposed to be that, you know, that's V.C. Andrews. That's the difference between like the ghostwriter and V.C. Andrews. He, you know, she sort of lets the awful thing happen, and it's almost like a fairy tale. It's almost like a story that's being told, like the fact that she finally becomes the first Audrina by sacrificing and staying again. And speaking of which, though, I was asking you beforehand, personally with Lucky and Elspeth, I think Aunt Elspeth is a really interesting character. I think that it's also sort of, she's the character that demonstrates the difference between V.C. Andrews and Andrew Niederman as a ghostwriter. Yeah. Andrew Niederman tends to take the sort of evil characters, and they're like all evil.
Yes.
Or, you know, whereas V.C. Andrews took a character like Elspeth. Now, if the ghostwriter had Elspeth, she would have had no redeeming qualities. Yep. She would have joined in on torturing Audrina, etc. But with V.C. Andrews, you show this sort of complex... Yeah, there's layers and colors. And, you know, she loves Audrina as much as she can because she knows that it's going to set Vera off. And it's just... That's what we're missing from the ghostwriter stuff. I really like what the ghostwriter did with Ruby. He wrote the entire Ruby series. It is one of my favorites. But I'm rereading it now in anticipation. Don't worry, we'll have an episode when the Ruby series comes out. But I'm rereading it with Daphne, and she's so just evil. There's no dimensions. There's nothing.
And, you know, we talked a little bit about this because I said Vera is absolutely despicable. Like, after reading the book again, I was like, she's evil. Like, I don't care what happened to her that was so horrible. She is horrible. But he made a really good point. Like, but there's a reason. Yeah, it's not just because.
We don't have to forgive Vera. We don't have to. She's still ultimately despicable and evil. But V.C. Andrews still gives her a motivation. There's still, like, some reason there with, like, somebody from Daphne who tortures Ruby endlessly. It's, I guess, out of, you know, the only sort of foundation she gets is that she was jealous because Pierre loved Ruby's mother, or Gabrielle, but it's not even, she doesn't even really love Pierre that much. It's, like, there's no reason for her to be, like, upset. But with Elspeth, there's so much going on there. Because the first time I read it, I thought she was going to be like a grandmother type character. And even the grandmother, you always find out there's more to her than this. And what were you going to say, though?
I wanted to say that I think Elspeth and the dad were really Audrina's heroes.
Yeah, okay.
You know what I mean? Like, in the book, Arden is a complete, absolute bad thing. But in the movie, obviously, adaptation, he's the hero.
Right, they really changed that with Arden,
and they don't really show you, like, a little bit of Elsbeth trying to, like, talk to the dad.
A little bit, yeah.
And the dad kind of thinking and kind of, like, letting Audrina go here and there. But I think he still really had a tight leash on her in the movie.
For sure.
Or in the books, he really does start to give her a little bit of space. While he's still strict, but he saved her at the end from the route where Sylvia took her. You know, he saved her from this horrible thing that happened, even though we might not agree with his method.
Right.
He did what he thought he could.
I agree completely.
Yeah. And then Elspeth was there kind of trying to give Audrina hints in this, like, don't stay in this house, like, this and that. She'd also talked to the dad in the book as well. So I think those two people really had her best interests at heart.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And I agree it's a sort of a controversial thought because the dad obviously didn't handle things in the best way possible, and he did act very selfishly a lot of times, and he was a criminal. You know, he committed fraud and all that. But he did love Audrina, and it was always a love for Audrina. You know, even with, like, when you're watching the movie at first, because you know V.C. Andrews, I feel like, is this the one book that really doesn't have any incest in it? Mm-hmm. But you are kind of like, ooh, what's the daddy going to do when you first start watching it?
In the movie.
And even when you read the book, you see you see her in the rocking chair and the step back and all that, and you're kind of like, something's going to happen here. And they never do it. It's great. Yes. But you are sort of position to think that. And also with Elspeth, you're going to think she's like the evil, wicked stepmother aunt type. But she is the one who fights for Audrina to have schooling. She is the one who stands up to Damien constantly. And I think that they have it's an interesting story. And that's, again, what we were missing from this adaptation is the sort of these two sisters in love with one man, as well as the other two sisters, Vera and Audrina, cousin sisters, who are in love with Arden. Yeah. And I do want to make sure we do really clarify our problems with Arden. Yeah. Because in the movie, he does become sort of this white knight hero. He is the savior, the one who's going to
He's
love.
Forgivable, yeah.
Yeah, very forgivable.
Yeah.
And I think it's comparable to what they ended up doing with the Lifetime adaptation of Flowers in the Attic.
Yeah.
Where in the novel, obviously, Christopher rapes Kathy,
Yep.
and she forgives him. But I think that they thought at Lifetime, like, whoa, nobody's going to understand this. So they ended up making Kathy the one who was like, it's okay, let's do it. I get it.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. and that's kind of what, like, with this one, Arden, you know, they changed his role in the woods. In the woods, he just ran away.
Yeah.
And he was a little tiny kid to these big guys. I understood why he ran away.
Absolutely.
It makes him less of a hero, etc. But
more believable.
But for some reason, Lifetime was like, whoa, wait, no, he's got to try and fight these big kids. And they hold him down. I mean, why then would he feel guilty? He tried. He couldn't do anything. And so, you know, it's the same thing in my opinion. It's a different scenario, but, like, they tried to, like, make him a better guy.
Yeah.
And that would be fine, except there was nothing for him to do wrong in the later books. Like, he sort of kissed Vera. That was, like, the one thing he did wrong. Otherwise, he was, like, the perfect guy. Yeah. And in the novel, he cheats on her constantly with Vera. Didn't you remind me today about how, like, they had sex possibly when they were kids, Vera and
Vera
Arden.
Lost her baby.
I forgot about that, yes.
But really, then she, like...
It was Arden's, yeah. I mean, as much as we all find out, and we are, just so everybody knows, please tune in, Danielle and I are going to start doing some mini episodes on V.C. Andrews' theories about what did you think or stuff. It's going to be a lot of fun. I think that there's an audience out there for it. But yes, this is one of those mysteries that they never quite confirm. This is what V.C. Andrews does. You know, it's sort of like the... You know, did Corinne leave Corey in the attic? It's one of those sort of things where, wait, even though Vera says it was Arden's child, was it?
Right.
But what it does still leave is whether that's true or not, they slept. There has had to be evidence for it, or something had to happen. Right. So, again, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about the change, and I'm sure, I know that you all out there have opinions, so I don't know.
For me, as a woman, or whatever.
No, for sure.
You know what I mean. You want Arden to be the good guy.
I know, yeah.
So when I was reading the book again, I was like, it's horrible. Yeah. And I'm like, leave this man now.
Correct, yeah.
And then when I was watching the movie, I was like, I love him.
Right, it's sort of
stay with him and never leave him.
And it's what I'll give.
Different.
It's what I'll give Lifetime is that clearly it's made by the fans, and they're making these subtle changes that they apparently have had trouble with reading it like we did at 13, 14, where we're reading it for like the romantic scenes, we're reading it for like the dramas, but like. In the end, it's almost like the last pages, it's kind of like, okay, she's not going to end up with him, I can live with it, and then you're like, but I kind of want her to, whereas in the movie, they're like, no, let's make it happen, let's really make it happen, so it's kind of, I have mixed emotions about it. I also really enjoy the movie because it is sort of a happy ending for this girl that had this horrible life, whereas in the novel, it's really centered on, these people are awful, but because she's now the first Audrina, she still goes back to them and gives them love unconditional no matter what they do. But yeah, I mean, and it's hard.
They should have kicked Arden out.
Well, and because I mean, Arden's played by William Mosely. The first time I saw him was in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And I remember thinking he was a really good Peter in that, like loved him in that. So when I saw that he was Arden, I was like, oh, that's going to be so weird. And I'm like, oh, he's doing such a good job. He's so charming and all this. And I'm like, I don't want him to, I know he's going to go bad. And then he never did. Yeah. And then again, the first time I watched it, you know, it went, like I said, I felt like it went by so fast. Yeah. But again, I don't know, maybe it was because it was broken up with commercials or whatnot. Yeah. But now that I've watched it a couple times, I'm like, you know what? I kind of really like this adaptation. Like it,
and we, you know, and as V.C. Andrews fans, we all know, like, we are big sticklers on a lot of things. Yeah. And that was a pretty big change at the end of my show. Like, to have Arden just flip like that.
A lot of big changes, losing characters, all that,
So, but honestly, with all that stuff, which we're usually really picky about, I loved the movie. Yeah. I thought it was great.
I think it's a nice, entertaining spin on it, especially because I feel like it would be one of the hardest novels to adapt. It actually does a really good job. It's like removing Paul from Petals on the Wind. They took out Sylvia. They took out Billy. And I would love to see an adaptation that had all that, but the only way that's going to happen is if...
It's a 4.
Right, and I'm surprised, now that I think about it, I'm surprised that because they were willing to make 4 4 adaptations of Flowers in the Attic, 5 of Heaven, that they didn't try to make this like 2 parts. And I think that they could have. Well, you would have been able to have all the characters then.
So with the removal of Sylvia and Billy, I feel like they really could take that story to how they did. I think if we had Billy there, it would have changed things, and it would have, and Sylvia, I think almost would have complicated the plot too much, because they didn't have enough time to develop those characters, if you will, to really show the impact that they would have had on the characters that we did have. So I am fine with their removal.
Well, yeah, I would say only if they were going to make it into 2 parts.
Right.
But yeah, no, I mean, it definitely helps to have the removal of these characters, and you kind of get like the stripped down story, and it's still a good story. I always pictured, this was one of the books that I read by, V.C. Andrews, that I really did have an idea in mind. Like, it was sort of, like a 40s sort of film, murder mystery type thing. It's all taking place at this house. I think it would make a really interesting play. But for this movie, for it being on Lifetime and having that sort of like mid-2000 teens shininess to it, it's still the closest to capturing the atmosphere of the story. I noticed more when she's like walking through the woods. There's a sort of hauntingness to it, and that I didn't notice the first time through. So I do want to say, because I think a lot of people did not care for this adaptation, and I'm sure that there are people that did. I came around to it. I really did really enjoy it now, or I do really enjoy it now. Again, a lot of stuff that they changed that's frustrating, but I think it's worth a second look. So if you get a DVD of it or a copy of it, I think you'll be pleased.
So what I wanted to say is, they started the movie off with, this is my sister, I have her same name, and she died, on her 9th birthday or whatever. And in the books, I remember, because I know you love the book, but for me, I guess when I first started reading this book, I thought, who are these wackadoos? who their kid dies, and then they name their son, and obviously now that I'm older, and you've made so many good points referencing when you read it when you're 13, 14 versus when you read it now. I absolutely loved the book this time around. I knew, obviously I know, but I knew something, this isn't right. When I was 13, I was like, who are these crazies?
For sure.
And so you're watching the movie, and I think a lot of people start and they're like, this is going to be weird. This makes no sense. Why would people do this? And we're going to have to watch this, poor girl suffer, whatever, because she's trying to be her dead sister. So, I just wanted to point that out. When you're young, you really see things differently.
Well, and I think that's why it would be good for people to maybe go through, just like reading any of her novels. I mean, that's why I think we go back to them time and time again. I've read Flowers in the Attic countless times, Petals on the Wind countless times. You've read Heavens numerous times. And this one, for me, because there's always something you miss. And it is definitely, as you get older, you have different perspectives. Even though, I think when I read it the first time through, even knowing the stuff that Vera and Arden do, it's you still want to forgive them from a naive. You want everything to work out. You want Vera to be like, you know what, I'm so sorry I did this, Audrina, because what she did was horrible. But at the same time, now as an adult, I'm like, she is a terrible person. But I do, as a character, reading a novel, I think Vera is one of the most interesting, quote-unquote, villains. She's, like we said, it's the difference between what a ghostwriter would do versus V.C. Andrews. She gives all this other insight, you do know. And that was one of my only other criticisms with this, as the whole climax was happening. They realized Vera set the whole thing up. She's starting to explain it, but I don't know if the sound was going in or something. She keeps getting cut off by Damien before she gets out, that all she wanted was his love. And she thought, if maybe Audrina wasn't so perfect, horrible, this is awful, this is terrible, but it at least gives you an idea of why Vera is a little bit the way she is. Whereas again, in some of the ghost-written novels later on, Grandmother Cutler, it's you don't find out until the prequel why Grandmother Cutler's so evil. But in the rest of the books, the V.C. Andrews would have given her some sort of
well, it's
development.
the Grandmother in Flowers in the Attic too. We really don't find out later until...
Yeah, but she does try, like, she tries to give them the chrysanthemums.
Yeah,
you know, she does try. She's very clear.
You're right.
But, again,
we could go all around with all
this. And so, you know, and that's the thing. I think, like, if there was one series I wish that V.C. Andrews could continue, it would have been My Sweet Audrina. But at the same time, it'll always be... Because I guess they did do a sequel. The ghostwriter wrote White Fern, which I haven't read yet. I don't know if people out there have read it. But I loved that it was always sort of this self-contained story. It almost seems like a fable or, you know, a sort of like cyclical story. So going back, that's why it's one of the reasons why it's so interesting to go back and read.
Yeah.
And
you should reread V.C. Andrews novels because
there's always
every decade I learn something new or I have a different... It's like a brand new story. Everyone always asks me, why can you read that book over and over? And I go, because every 5 years I have a new perspective.
It's so true, though.
I have another
it's
life
so true.
experience.
And that's why I'm glad I came, because, then here's a perfect example of it, is this adaptation. When I watched it in 2015 or 14 or whatever, it was, I did not care for it. And I'm like, I'm never going to watch this again. And then, Mermaiden, I think her name is, who you know who you are, responding down below, she recommended to me, hey, just, you know, it's on DVD. So I was like, all right, you know what, I own the rest of them now, even Rain, all those. I'm like, it should be in my collection. And I rewatched it and I'm like, I liked it this time. Yeah. Like, I don't know why I didn't. Oh, exactly. And I'm like, I don't even know why I didn't really like it the first time. I mean, of course, missing characters, there's always going to be a knee-jerk reaction. Yeah. But as a story, as a Lifetime adaptation that's only going to be 86 minutes longer, whatever they're doing, I really enjoyed it this time.
We're saying thumbs up on this.
Yeah, definitely a good choice, you know, and give it another chance. But don't miss, we'll be coming back to you soon to talk about Ruby. That's only in a couple weeks. Yep. And we have a few other little episodes coming out along the way. This one over here, you know, I probably have been rereading, I probably reread V.C. Andrews every year or so, at least one of the series, and I feel like you take bigger breaks. Yeah. But I was trying to think of some fun stuff that we could do. And I had a couple of good ones. This one out here was like, oh, what about this? So we've got some fun stuff coming. And let us know below, you know, what you thought of My Sweet Audrina. Is it one of your favorite novels? What did you think of the adaptation? I'm your host, Justin Steele. With me is Danielle Almendra. And this is 411 Pop Culture, where real people talk about really everything. Thanks for watching. Did you like the house or not?
I didn't like it.
Why not? It looked really good.
I never liked the house.
What didn't you like about it? It looked exactly like the house in the novel.
No, it didn't.
Yeah, it did.
No.
Well, how did it not look like the house?
It's not as run down as it should be. It still looks too nice.
Okay, but it looks like
We're
the house.
Allowed to disagree.
Yeah, but your thing's
just
always...
Just because of the cupola?
Listen, your thing is always the house never looks anything right. You're always saying, like, Farthingale Manning looked too small, or this or that, and I'm like, it actually looks like how it's supposed to look, even though it should be more run down and stuff.
I will specify what I mean, okay?
All right, geez.
We don't have to agree.
All right.
All right, we'll start with the narration, because I disagree there.
Yeah, in fact, I'm jumping all the way back. You think it would be an easy story to adapt?
No, I agree with that, but I think we need but I think we need a narrator.
A voiceover.
Yeah, a voiceover.
Okay, fine. All right, I'm starting all the way back over. Sorry, this whole thing's being cut. Exactly. Was there anything else you kind of wanted to...
There was, but I completely forgot, because I didn't want to interrupt you.
Okay. Lamar...
No. We were just talking about what we were just talking about.
The woods, the atmosphere... Style.
I have no idea what it was.
Arden. Changing.
It's gone. It's okay. If I think about it later, you can put it in there as a blurb or something.
Well, I don't know. There's something else I can think of talking about.
I'm just trying to think. There was a point, but I didn't want to interrupt you because I always do that. This is what happens when I don't interrupt, and then I forget my thought. Give me a second.
Yeah, well, when you interrupt me, I forget my thoughts, so we're fair. Okay, let's take a... John Amos